In order to design for well-being in the office, we have to design for well-being in people's lives and understand where the pain points are sort of in their lives so that the office can respond to it. Like, can the office be a safe haven in some ways? Can it be restorative?
Welcome to You Belong in the C-Suite podcast. You are ambitious in life and in your career, but something is missing. You want to bring more of your passion to what you do. Because let's be honest, you pour a ton into your work, and it needs to mean more. I'm your host, Laura Eigel. I'm a mom, wife, PhD, coach, advocate, introvert, and indoor rowing fanatic. I'm passionate about living a life that's in line with my values. We'll give you the actionable tips and tools you need to lead with your values, make a difference, and have career success. The world needs more diversity and authenticity in the top jobs at organizations. Your leadership belongs there. You belong in the C-Suite. What gets you up in the morning? What drives your decisions? What do you stand for? No idea, not even sure where to start? I use my values to guide my life and career. It's the basis of how I've built boundaries for myself and stuck to them. Are you ready to dig into what matters to you? Go to thecatchgroup.com to download your free values worksheet. That's thecatchgroup.com to download your free values worksheet to get to your core values and take action on what matters most. Welcome to this week's episode of the You Belong in the C-Suite podcast. Y'all, I know I'm probably not supposed to have favorite guests, but this conversation brought me so much energy. I am so excited for you to hear my conversation with Rebecca Swanner. As a workplace sector leader at HED, a national powerhouse in integrated architecture and engineering, Rebecca Swanner is a driving force behind HED's transformative workplace design sector. Rebecca's journey spans years of shaping environments for the world's most influential brands. Her portfolio reads like a who's who of industry leaders. A visionary that intimately understands how to translate brand into physical space, Rebecca consistently delivers spaces that embody her clients' ethos. Rebecca's innate ability to forge strong relationships with her clients guarantees a positive, refreshing experience and built spaces that underpin the highlights of each company's unique culture. She is a frequent speaker on workplace and strategy podcasts where she advocates for human-centered design strategies that prioritize wellness, balance, and employee engagement. In our conversation, Rebecca shares her career journey, which she had clarity on at a very early age. While our conversation centered around designing workspaces that align with the company's culture, our conversation was really about designing strategies inside and outside of the office that empower teams to lead balanced and connected lives that ultimately impact employee and organizational engagement. We talked about the return to office, the struggles that companies and employees are having, and the role that workplace design can have in shaping the culture you want for your team and organization. We discussed how employees' behaviors have shifted due to hybrid work and how workplace design can help meet those needs. Rebecca highlighted that workplaces can serve the company's culture for not only the employees, but also the communities the company serves, and why that's a benefit for the organization. She gives examples of intentional design and intentional connection for teams inside and outside of the office to meet the needs of employees, to reduce friction, to help employees be more engaged and productive. Be sure to listen to the whole episode where at the end, Rebecca tells us the most important thing a leader can do for their teams as they think about workplace design and team effectiveness. I know you're going to love this discussion as much as I did. Let's get started. Well, I want to welcome you to the You Belong in the C-Suite podcast. Thank you so much for joining us, Rebecca.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to share this space with you. But before we dig into like all the really good stuff and hear and extract all the good stuff that you've done from your experience, I want to hear about your career experience. So do you mind walking us through a little bit of your career journey?
Yeah, so I come from a traditional architecture background. I've wanted to be an architect in Los Angeles since I was 7 years old. I was very specific as a child. So I did that. I graduated from architecture school in May and moved to Los Angeles in, I think, June. And out the gate started working for a very hip architecture firm in Los Angeles. I was not nearly cool enough or trendy enough to work there, but for some reason they took me with all my East Coasterliness. And from there, I did end up transitioning to a firm that did TI, as we call it in the industry, tenant improvement. So focusing on mostly interior workspaces and creative offices,
Mm.
and really fell in love with it because I found that compared to my more traditionally architecture focused colleagues from school where they would work years and years and then maybe not have something completed in their portfolio yet. I can meet a client, and from the time I meet them to the time I'm hugging them goodbye, in their beautiful new space, I'm a hugger, it can all happen within a year, sometimes faster than that. And so I really latched on to the intensity and the speed, the adrenaline of
Mhm.
designing for a workplace. And so after that, I've, worked at a couple different national firms that do architecture and interiors, but I really have focused on workplace. So right now I am a workplace leader at Harley Ellis Devereaux, HED, and we are a national architecture, interiors, and engineering firm. Yes, I do work on architectural projects. We're working on a ground up 100,000 square foot office right now that has some community components, some library components, and other things in the building, but it's primarily workplace. But really, my passion is the workplace component, and a lot of those are existing buildings and doing the interiors portion of it. And I will also mention that just because I live in LA, I design for clients all across the country, but a lot of them are in Los Angeles. And when you design workspace in Los Angeles, you might end up also needing to have a broadcast studio or
Mm.
a bar or a green screen room. So there are all these ancillary spaces that are really exciting that I've been able to develop an expertise for as well.
I love it. Thank you so much for giving us that context. I want to ask you about, you've known what you wanted to do since you were 7 and
Yes.
knew that you wanted to like move across the country to do it. So how did you get that clarity? How did you know that so early?
I was always creative and loved art, but incredibly practical.
Mm.
So I wasn't the child who said, I'm going to be a ballerina when I grow up. I'm going to be an artist because I just didn't feel like that was attainable. And so architecture was a very clear way to apply my passion and skills. And I
Mhm.
think I also had some guidance from my parents as well. If anyone out there has children that are considering architecture, there are a couple programs that different universities put on for preteens that simulate architecture studio, and they put me in one of those because I was interested, and it for me it just confirmed, it validated that that was the right place for me. I will say that I love my job right now, and I feel really privileged to be able to say that. And I think also a lot of the listeners on this podcast and the people that I design for are people who have the privilege of choosing what they do for a living and who they work for. And so I think with that population, there's certain expectations too that affect how we design for them, and the people that are managing those people, it also affects how you manage them because they have choice. And that's a privilege.
It is. I love that you just said that because I think this idea of choice, I think, pre-pandemic, it was, the employer had some of the control right, and then we went to great resignation, and then it was more employee, and then pandemic happened, and now we're feeling this pull back to employer. But I think a lot of people forget that there's still a bunch of choice, right? And some of
Mhm.
that can be driving some of the decisions that we make. I see it from my clients. A lot of them are struggling to get people back to the office. So there's all this return to office stuff. They're very, maybe grew up more traditionally, like in office all the time with that expectation. And now the world has kind of shifted, right? And so the reality of the wants and those who have the choice versus the folks that are trying to get people back in are sometimes in conflict.
Well,
And
and
so,
that word return sort of bothers me because
yeah.
like when else in history have we said we want to return to like why do we want to go back? We're moving forward. We're moving forward. Like do we want to return to the way things were? I don't know. I think in some ways just like there are very serious issues with the healthcare system, there are issues with the system of work. And technology has provided a lot of freedom and access, and people can work anywhere at any time. But there are repercussions to that. And so, how does work respond to that? How does the workplace respond to that? And so, I think this idea that, you know, how close can we get to the way things were pre-COVID? I think we need to totally reject that mindset and say, oh my God, we have learned so much. And this took this trajectory we were on and just accelerated. Like, we were on a commercial, airline, and now
Mhm.
we're on a rocket ship to the moon all of a sudden,
Yeah.
on how drastically change, how fast workplace and the way we approach it is changing when it comes
Yeah.
to return to work.
That's right. And I love that perspective on it's not why are we returning to something that probably didn't benefit a lot of us anyway? And what is it that we're returning to? I think from an HR perspective, when it first hit, people said return to work, which was even more bananas because people were working actually more. So
Right.
it was hard to say, wait a minute, I've been working a lot. So of course you mean the office? They're like, oh yeah, that's what I mean. So there's even some rebranding of that messaging that had to happen. But I'd love
Yep.
to get you've seen a lot of this. You saw it pre-pandemic, you saw it during when it felt like a lot of organizations used that time to renovate offices, right? When people were out of them. And now it feels like they're being pulled back in. And it is I'm just seeing a lot of the shift to as we talk about it. Oh, we have to be back in the office because you have to have the culture. You can only have the culture in the office. And I don't exactly I think it's a I don't hate to use the word hybrid, but you can have a culture without it. There's lots of companies that do that, do it well. There's some that do it poorly. And I think that rationale is a little lazy, just a little like, oh, you can only do this here. But then now that people are back into the office, they have these policies that are like, okay, we have to do this. You have to be in the office 3 days a week. Some of the offices may not even have enough room for people. They don't have all the spaces for them to do the things that it's very important. So people are going back in, they're just sitting on Teams calls all day. And so it feels like we've not really thought this out. And so you've seen a lot of this yourself as people are redoing their offices and changing to hopefully meet kind of the company culture. But like how do you see it done well? I think people are just talking about the stuff that they're struggling with, but I haven't seen like really great examples of we've redesigned this space and it's really working for our culture because of X, Y, and Z. Like our culture is this, and here's a space that helps us do that. Can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, so I think one really important thing to keep in mind is that people commit to people. And so this return to work push, when it's in a top-down mannerism and there's a corporate policy that says everyone or these departments must be in on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, first of all, everyone's resistant right away. Guards go up, and people are frustrated and they feel like their organization doesn't trust them. So that's a problem. Whereas if you approach it differently and you say, listen, we're going to have individual managers get together with their teams and figure out what works best for those people on that team and have them commit to each other. We're going to come in on these specific days because it works with our schedules and it works with the project cadence, and let them commit to each other. And I think the times when it's most successful is when, and some companies can do it on their own. Some companies bring in someone like me, a workplace strategist, to help them ask the right questions of their employee base to understand what their office needs to have to support those employees to do their best work. In some companies, they don't want to pay someone to do this, but I have to tell you it's a lot less expensive than dealing with turnover and employees leaving. I mean, that's the most expensive thing. And so I think when employees in an office see physical evidence that at the highest level, the company cares about them, not just as productive members of the team, but as humans, they appreciate that and it resonates. Because, I mean, I'm sure you're seeing it too. People want to work for companies they can get behind the mission and what they stand for. And you don't have to have a company that's trying to end world hunger. That's not what I'm saying. Maybe really you started this business because you want to be really profitable. And what that does is it means you're empowering the people who work for you to have resources to support their family, and have, their own money to put towards good or whatever they want. So it's not like you need to be Mother Teresa for everyone to get behind you and your mission. You just have to be really authentic and transparent about it, so that your employees can get behind you or not. And I think there are ways to design the workplace again to respond to them as humans. And I can give one example if this is helpful. So I was working for, this was not when I was HED, a prior international architecture firm, and we were getting ready to redesign our own office. And we did, it was during COVID, so we did a charrette, digitally where everyone's doodling things. And I knew that there were a lot of us. I'm a mother of young children, which is a really big part of my identity. I say being a mom is actually my number one job. I love working at HED. And I've told my CEO before, it's the second best job I've ever had, but being a mom is number one. And so I put on that list that it'd be really great in this new office, 40,000 square foot office space. There should be a corner somewhere that's really a safe, welcoming space for children. So if I have to run into the office on a day that I'm not coming to the office and I have my 4-year-old with me and I just need her to just relax and focus on something for 15 minutes for me to print something or meet with a colleague or mark something up, I can do that. And that would make me feel like there's an accommodation for me as a human in that office. And when I doodled that on the digital board, so many people were circling it and starring it and highlighting and saying, yes, this. But that's just one example for one very specific population. And so I think it's important, again, whether you hire a workplace strategist or you do it internally, to know what is the demographic in your office, because we know that different generations have different appreciations for what the ideal workplace should feel like. Is it a institutional, educational, library type learning space? Is it a coffee shop? Is it homey? What is it? And so you need to know, first of all, who are you designing for?
I love all of those questions. Oh my goodness. As you think about the role that company culture plays and even a team's culture plays, how do you and what kinds of things are you thinking about as you design the space for a team? If they have certain values, certain behaviors, a certain way that they work, how do you extract that from them as you're working with them? How do you get to what's the most important way for this team or this organization to do the work in alignment with their culture?
So one of the greatest tools we have for extracting information is in-person workshopping. We have surveys we can put out, we have visuals, but really the in-person is what it's really where the magic happens, because people feed off from each other and are empowered and inspired by each other. And I also think it's important to have someone who understands the possibilities of how work can be done in the room, because what I found from my experience is that if you ask someone what their ideal workspace is, they will regurgitate different aspects of their current workspace.
Mm,
And you have to ask them again and again. And sometimes you have to reframe. I have to ask the same question 4 different ways to get with the answer that I'm really trying to get, which is not what do you have, but what do you want? And how can I help you imagine a better way of working? And I think also for the executives making the decisions, don't be afraid to experiment.
mm,
If you don't get it right the first time, that's okay. And your employees aren't going to resent you for it. They're going to appreciate you trying and listening and saying, that's a great idea. No one's really doing it that way. Let's see if it works. No harm, no foul. So I think us being open to experimentation is really important, because again, we're on the rocket ship, right?
yeah.
This isn't the slow airplane anymore.
Do you find using that analogy that there's still people that are on the airplane when you're designing for the rocket ship, and how do you meet their expectations moving forward? Like, I'm scared to get on the rocket ship.
Right, right. I understand that. And I would say a lot of times too, those people are afraid to give me access
Mm,
to their employees because they're worried about, they know the questions and intellectually they appreciate the questions, but they're afraid of the answers. And so if you play it safe and you're afraid to ask those questions, we can still deliver a beautiful workspace for your company, but is it really going to elevate your culture and elevate the lives of your people? And I think you have to be willing to ask very honest and sometimes open-ended questions
Yeah.
and be willing to respond to those.
Yeah. Does it seem like the people that are seeking out your counsel are usually those that enables them to get on that rocket ship, like because they're seeking the help?
It's really a mix. It
Okay.
is a mix. Different companies come to us for different reasons and for different scopes. So, because we do everything, workplace strategy, interior, architecture, I mean, like everything related to an existing or new building going up. So, it's really the full gamut. And sometimes they'll come to us and they don't even realize that this is part of it. This front end question seeking is really important. And so there's a little bit of education that happens there, which again, for me is really exciting.
My award-winning book, Values First: How Knowing Your Core Beliefs Can Get You the Life and Career You Want, is now available in audiobook. Since the book released just last year, the biggest question that I've gotten from readers is it available in audiobook? In this book, you'll get to hear my most pivotal career stories and some of the successes of my clients as you learn about the Values First framework and how you can take action on your life and career. The audiobook is narrated by me, so if you love this podcast, you'll love the audiobook. Values First: How Knowing Your Core Beliefs Can Get You the Life and Career You Want is now available on Audible and iTunes. Is there an example that you can share that you designed a space, whether it was updating an existing space or changing the nature of some of these spaces to better align with how a group works, whether that was a collaborative space or moving from traditional offices to hoteling, or like, can you give an example of something that changed the way they worked?
The example that comes to mind, I don't think it changed the way they work, but I think it responded to how they work and how people feel coming back into the office. And
Yeah.
so this is a client where it is a new ground up office building. And there is this feeling by some people who work at that company, this feeling of exposure and coming back to the office. First of all, you have to wear pants. You can't wear pajama pants anymore. Like all that there are things sort of we got away with. If someone wanted to meet with you, you could hide out. You could pretend you're not at your computer. So there's this feeling of being exposed and being on display. And I think a little bit of social anxiety as people return to the office and present themselves in their physical form. And so one thing we did to respond to that is that we created hiding spots in the office. So if you want to take a call, if you're feeling over socialized, if you just want an hour to disappear, maybe it's because you realize when you work from home, you can turn off your email and no one can bother you and you can just focus and get really difficult, full concentration work done. We need to have places like that in the office now. And so we literally created hiding spots that each department knows about, but the general public doesn't know about and visitors don't know about. And when you're in one of those spaces, it's the same as having your headphones on, even when you're not listening to music. It means don't bother me because I'm focusing or because I just need time to myself and my own thoughts.
I love that. The introvert in me is like so happy to hear that spaces like that exist in offices now. So what does that physically look like? Like, is it a booth?
They're
What is
different.
it?
Yeah. So there's different forms. There's ones that are literally like niches in the wall, where
Mhm.
you just kind of duck into one. So when you're looking down the hallway, you can't see into them. And then there are ones that are actual rooms. But yeah, just places to get lost intentionally.
Places to get lost intentionally. I love it.
Let the
That
walls absorb
feels,
you.
yeah, it feels futuristic in terms of
Yes.
office design. So how else has hybrid work impacted, and the kind of the behaviors of hybrid work impacted the design of an office?
Yeah, so one example in our office specifically, so we have almost 100 people in an office in downtown Los Angeles. And that's expensive real estate. And we are very aware of the reality that everyone is not coming in every single day of the week. So there are times when the office is underutilized. And I know a lot of business owners are dealing with this. And so our space was designed in a way to fulfill other functions other than just typical 9 to 5 work. So it has a great, what I would say is what I would call a traditional boardroom opens up with operable sliding glass doors into a larger cafe space that works really well to sort of put its party shoes on for evening events. And so we share our space. ULI, Crew, Cornet, like all these other organizations will also use our space for different social and professional functions. So I think thinking about how you're going to leverage your space beyond 9 to 5 can be really valuable, or even, the 9 to 5 when all of your staff isn't there. What else can happen in that office? And how can it serve your business mission? How can it serve your community? How can it serve your employees? I think they're all interesting questions and would inform how your space is laid out.
I love that question because it feels like it could also be connected back to the company's values too. If they have an external perspective, like you said, because I think that's a big fear is it's empty. Like as an executive, I walk in and nobody else is there. And the fear is we're paying for this beautiful place that we just redid or whatever, and nobody's utilizing it. And then you kind of go down this rabbit hole of, well, what's going to happen to the culture? Where are people working? Are they working? And it goes down, like you said, this kind of spiral of trust,
Yeah.
mistrust, not trusting, and it's really just because a room is empty, right?
Right, right. And we know, I mean, if an office is empty, it's like going to a restaurant when no one's there. You're like, oh, maybe the health department just left. Like this is not a good place. It's not a good place to be. So, and I think that's also part of the return to work policy. When I said people commit to people, people who work together need to be coming in on the same days. If I am going to go to the office, I don't want to hang out with my third cousin twice removed. I want to see my sister or my brother. And so that's why there has to be this agreement among people who work together to come in on the same days. And I think that's important. And I think also, I mean, just to share a personal anecdote, what we've done at our company recently, and it has been wildly successful, is understand that not everything needs to happen in the office. And this is coming from someone who literally designs millions of square feet of office space for a living. And I'm telling you, there are some activities and it's okay for them to happen outside the office. For example, maybe your space isn't really large, and it's important as part of your values and your culture to have a dinner with everyone. Host it in your backyard. I mean, that's what I was doing during COVID when we couldn't come into the office. What our company has started recently is a policy we call or program called neighborhood lunch breaks.
Mm.
And so the idea is in Los Angeles, we're thinking big picture, and you have to do this. What are the obstacles that keep your people coming into the office all the time? And in Los Angeles, commute is a huge one because people can live 10 miles from each other in Los Angeles, and that could be an hour and a half drive at the wrong time of day on the wrong day of the week. So what we've done is, and with our 100 so people in LA, we divided up by geographic areas, neighborhoods, and we get together and we have lunch together on a non-office day. So I'm working from home, but then I put on real pants and real shoes and I go down the street to the neighborhood eatery and we break bread together and we realize, oh my goodness, our children are in the same soccer league and we go to the same grocery store. And did you know that the movie theater on such and such just closed down? And we have these amazing connections. And then when we see each other in the office, we're that much more excited because we have so much in common. And without that program, we wouldn't know that. So I think designing workspace in a intentional way is a huge asset. Like, yes, we need to do that, but we also need to have programs to support people coming back and to support people connecting with each other. You can't just set up blind dates everywhere. You have to give people common ground.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that perspective, like that coming from you, this is your job. I have to tell a story that I was on a plane, I don't know, a couple months ago. And I am usually one of those people that like just has their headphones in and I'm just like reading or doing things. Like it's not my favorite to like chat with somebody, but I had a neighbor who like he really needed to talk to me. So of course I'm gonna talk to him. Okay, fine. And so we talk about like what we do. And he was like, oh, you work with people on their cultures. I can tell you 5 words. He said 5 words that will help any culture. Get back to the office. And I was like,
Oh,
oh, that's it. That's an interesting point of view. What do you do for a living? Let's guess. Any ideas?
Oh, does he do what I do? Is he design office space?
He builds the buildings, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Commercial real estate offices. And so I was laughing and I said, "Okay, yeah, that's not biased at all, but that's all right." I think there's a time, but to your point, it's an intention, right? He said
Right.
I said, Do they all have to be the same as big? Are we building as big of buildings and all those kinds of things?" He's like, "Yes, the bigger the better." I said, "Okay, well, well, that's where we
He's
might
hoping to
differ."
manifest it. He's hoping to
Yeah.
manifest it.
Yeah, but I said, well, with intention, because there's lots of offices that are not designed for the intention of what you said for purpose. It's really just let's fill up the space, right? Because we're paying for it. And so I don't
Right.
want
Or
it to
yeah.
be that simple.
Or really great spaces that are great spaces, but they're not great spaces for that specific employee base because no one ever asked them
Mm, yeah,
what they need, or
yeah.
what they believe in. So I love Mary Oliver, and she says, she has a poem where she says, "What is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" And I feel like the workforce is really thinking about this. And, you can, and this is everyone in the company. There's also a great JFK story where he was visiting NASA and there was a janitor and he said, "What do you do here?" And the janitor said, "We're going to put a man on the moon." So he didn't say I clean the bathrooms. So again, these questions, I mean, people need to be able to get behind the organization and then the space has to be designed in a way that is a reflection of those values.
Yeah, and it feels like that's the miss. Like we built you this really great, new space, but to your point, we didn't ask anybody what they wanted or needed. Or we asked maybe the top executives or the C-suite, but we didn't include every voice. So do you find that that is really true, this idea that people are leaving some of these offices, that even if we try and do it, if we're not really including some of them, that we're designing the wrong thing? Or how does that show up with the client work that you do?
Yeah, I think, I see spaces where it's apparent that they're not asking questions, and so they're making decisions and they're providing amenities, but it might be the wrong amenity. I think also, again, it's about divorcing our minds from the way things have been done in the past. So I'm working with an amazing client, one of my favorite clients, and they are actually in the education sector, and they were designing a faculty suite for them which is going to feel very much like a first class airline lounge, like really luxe. And because if you look at a lot of faculty lounges in higher education, like it's not great. It's really not great. And so, and then the idea that students can meet with professors in this, we thought a lot about this. Like, can students be brought into this suite to meet with their faculty? And we decided yes, because it makes teaching an aspirational career path for them. They say,
Mm,
wow, like look at all the respect that the institution has for the faculty to give them this place, to be re-energized and refocused. And so I think just thinking about things differently than they've been done in the past and what the priorities are.
yeah, I love all those questions. Are students allowed or not? Like
Right.
yeah, it's a great question to ask because you could probably go either way, but like what a different view of aspiration for them.
Right. And I think also with the missing the mark or hitting the mark, it's a really simple question, which is just to ask your people, why are you coming into the office or why are you not coming into the office? A lot of companies aren't asking. They're just saying, come, 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 but they're not asking why. What's the why? Maybe it's something really simple. Maybe the parking's too expensive. Maybe the technology isn't working in the office, or why are they coming? Maybe they are coming because they can't focus at home. It's a disaster at home. And that's
Mhm.
why they're coming. And that's really good to know. So just ask the question, what are the obstacles to working at home for you? And what are the obstacles to working in the office for you? And how can we solve for those? I think something that's really interesting and inspiring to my team right now is we're as nationally as a workplace leadership team, we've come together and we've been having a lot of discussions around wellness
Mm.
and well-being and thinking about it more holistically. So we as a team who design work, we're the sector leaders for a workplace, are having these discussions where we're saying in order to design for well-being in the office, we have to design for well-being in people's lives. and understand where the pain points are sort of in their lives so that the office can respond to it. Like, can the office be a safe haven in some ways? Can it be restorative? But restoring from what? Like, what is it? Is it stuff that's happening in the office? Is it stuff that's happening at home in the world? And so there's some really big picture, really interesting conversations that are being had just amongst my team that I'm really excited about that's going to influence, our portfolio of work over the next decade as we design, the next generation of workplace and define well-being in new ways.
I love that holistic view. It's so interesting, like this American view of like work-life balance. Like work is called out first and then life. And then it's like, how do you balance the two when really it's just I don't want to say work like integration, but I'm a whole person that I bring that to work and I bring work home and like all the things, right? And so like being able to think about it from that holistic view, I also have the point of view that like your values are your values. You don't have work values and personal values. You just have values. And so what's important to you and how can you be fulfilled in all the places? And that's not separating some of that stuff out. So I love that holistic view. Is there anything else that you can talk about that you have seen here recently on overcoming some of this in-office friction? Anything else that we should be thinking about as leaders and organizations?
I think the only other thing that we haven't touched on that I would mention is this idea of radical trust, which personally I really believe in and I think is good for an organization. So, trusting your employee base to make the decisions that they need to make to do their best work. I think that's really important and just being really transparent with them. Like, this is what the organization needs to be successful. What is it that you need to be successful and how can we accommodate that? And then trusting them. Because if they're people you don't trust to do their work when you're not looking over their shoulder, they shouldn't be working for you. End of story. Like that's an easy solve. So if you have the right people, then just trust them and trust their input.
I love it. Amen to that. I love it. Well, I greatly appreciate your thought leadership and you sharing your point of view with us today. And what is the best way for us to stay connected to you?
I think the best way to reach out to me is probably on LinkedIn. Rebecca Swanner. I'm at HED, Harley Ellis Devereaux, and I'm happy to chat with anyone, who has follow-up questions about this topic. I'm really passionate about it. And as I mentioned, I feel really privileged to get to work in this space and help companies leverage their space to elevate their culture or their mission or their brand or even how their employees work together because I do think space is a really powerful tool when used properly.
Is there any one thing that you think leaders should do as an actionable step that anybody can take, either to reduce friction or to understand what their employees need?
Ask questions. And if you don't know what the questions are, reach out to me and I'll help you.
Well, thank you so, so much, Rebecca. I really appreciate your thought leadership today. I want to thank you so much for listening to the You Belong in the C-Suite podcast. If you are enjoying this content, please remember to rate and review on Apple Podcasts. By leaving a review, you are helping others find this content. We will be featuring 5-star reviews on air in upcoming episodes. Editing and support for the podcast is done by S&E Podcast Management. To get more tips and tools to help you live a life guided by your values, go to thecatchgroup.com. Keep your boundaries and take care.